Good morning and welcome. I wanted to say a couple words about the museum, especially for those of you who either haven't been here in a long time or are new to us. So UMMA is one of the oldest campus museums in the country. We started collecting in the 1860s, and the building next door, Memorial Hall, is about 100 years old. And we have an encyclopedic collection. The collection is more than 21,000 objects, but we have, like many encyclopedic museums, particular strengths. And those are in African art, in particular in West African art, in Japanese, Korean, and Chinese art before 1900, and in 19th century American art. We're also unusually hybrid. So we see about 240,000 people, which is a lot of people given the size of Ann Arbor. And we, if you kind of notice where we're located on State Street, and half of us faces backward to the quad, to the campus, and the other half really faces to the city. So we are truly a hybrid kind of civic and campus museum. We see, last year we saw more than 9,500 students. So right outside of this auditorium, you might have noticed that there are these classrooms, and those classrooms are object classrooms. And so faculty ask to see particular parts of the collection, and then those get integrated into their classes. And that is especially broad here. So we see faculty from geology and chemistry and the languages and history and American culture, et cetera, et cetera. One of our big goals, of course, is to do more of that, and in particular, to develop and strengthen our collaborations across campus. Collaborations between the museum and the Lieberthal-Rogel Center for Chinese Studies and the Confucius Institute have been especially strong, and they have helped make connections between artistic practices and museum practices and scholarship in art history, really focused on a range of subjects. You can see some of that upstairs currently, so I know that some of you had the opportunity to tour our really, really wonderful exhibition of Wang Qingsong, Detroit, Beijing, which is the artist's latest photographic project and focuses on issues of land use, globalization, and collective action across Beijing and Detroit. It's a very, very, very interesting project and has deep roots, of course, here in Michigan. The second, Art in the Age of the Internet, which is upstairs in our big gallery on the second floor, features provocative work by Fei and Zhang on the pervasiveness of internet culture really across all aspects of life. So it's one of the most ambitious surveys to look at the impact of internet culture on a whole generation of artists starting in the late 80s. For those of you who haven't seen it, it came from the ICA in Boston. I would strongly encourage you to take a look before the end of the day. I would like especially today to thank the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation providing lead support for Wang Qingsong, and the Confucius Institute and the Lieberthal-Rogel Center for Chinese Studies, both here at Michigan, and in addition, the Herbert W. and Susan L. Yowie Foundation Endowment. Thank you so much for being here, and a big thank you in particular to Fang for everything you have done to make today possible. And I'd like now to introduce Fang Zhang.
Thank you all for coming here in the early morning, and I would like to give my wholehearted thanks to all the speakers coming today, especially for Melissa Chu. She flows in from the early morning, like 3 a.m., and she has to fly out around 10 right after the session. And my greetings to all my friends who also come from New York, Washington, Miami, Atlanta, from all over the place at East Coast. And here we have this symposium coming into being over the last 2 years. I was a fellow invited by Lieberthal-Rogel Center for Chinese Studies in 2016. Thanks to Professor Robert Adams, you made it happen that I was ending up here for another 2 or 3 years more. So let me introduce our speakers. First, I Oh, I should give you a little background because I really think UMMA needs a lot of strong support to conduct a lot of research and scholarship into Chinese contemporary art. So like I was preparing, I will read out a little bit. Chinese contemporary art has been rising into our horizon since late 1970s after the Chinese government launched economic reform and opening up. It has remained a great momentum with a robust thrust for the last 4 decades, growing up from a little infant who explores this small sphere of knowledge world to a grown-up in its early 40s to demonstrate its maturity and capacity to tackle with issues worldwide. The creativity of Chinese contemporary art has constantly amazed our minds. These pioneers, along with many overseas world-renowned Chinese artists, have made an impressive career path and global impact. Here we celebrate the rejoice of getting the most amazing people who have instrumentalized Chinese contemporary art exhibitions and collections in the US. We will hear about their own odysseys of encountering with Chinese contemporary art in the US, and we will congratulate on UMMA faculty scholarship into deepening engagement through research and education over the last 3 decades. I know how busy each of you have been and coming from all over the places. Thanks to all of you again for your commitment to making this symposium happening here again. So let me introduce our speakers briefly. Dr. Melissa Chu actually visited U of M. I was reminding you 10 years ago, right here on this podium, right on November the 4th, 2009, Melissa Chu was invited again by Lieberthal-Rogel Center for Chinese Studies. She gave an amazing speech here talking about the development of Chinese contemporary in the last 3 decades. I think you were also talking up to 2009. And right here, she is going to give us another explicit introduction to her own odyssey. I revisited your video clip on YouTube. I strongly recommend you all of you to go search Melissa Chu on the YouTube. Again, you will see her reflections, which is still resonating in today's situation. And the next, Dr. Daisy E.U. Wang, another prestigious scholar on Chinese and East Asian art, works profoundly to deepen the interest of Chinese art in her different professional capacities. I was so much impressed by your talk at DIA, I think on December the 2nd, 2018, right? You give a brilliant speech talking about Charles Lanphier and his venture through his collection, right? Encountering with Chinese art in the early 1900s. And the third person, Dr. Vivian Lee of Wolverine, championed her distinctive curation at Worcester Museum in exhibiting both Chinese traditional and contemporary art. The recent show, Dangerous Liaisons Revisited, Art and Music Inspired by Tang Dynasty, was notably reviewed by a lot of art magazines. Christopher Phillips, the former curator of ICP, instrumentalized the Chinese contemporary art show, Photography and New Media Between Past and Present, which traveled all over the US and Europe in the last decade. Due to his dedicated efforts, remarkable achievements have been made for many US museums and collections. He recently donated all his art books on photography and video to the Central Academy of Fine Arts, and he personally has donated his art collection to Asia Society. I guess there are more, right? Chris can tell us. Next, Dr. Richard Wang, a prominent art critic and writer, has worked ages for Art in America, right? For your ages. One of the most important art magazines in the US. He has written numerous articles introducing groundbreaking Chinese contemporary art exhibitions over the last 2 decades. I still remember fondly how much we met each other, right, in an elevator during the Shanghai Biennial in 2000. And his recent venture celebrates his great achievement in writing a detective story, right, set in the art world. So go and check that out. And all of these wonderful stellar scholars' books and catalogs can be found in UMMA libraries. I have been personally benefiting a lot from introducing their art writings. Great entrepreneur and artist, fervent art collector Charles Jin has devoted his passion from making money in his business to spending it in an extravaganza of collecting artworks. His collection amasses 20th century American and European masterpieces to the nearly red-hot contemporary Chinese conceptual photo works. You will hear about his adventures later. Charles Jin is still tweeting, right? Anthony Hapoor, another Wolverine, is such a great collector, a wonderful medical doctor in practice, an honorable man of devotion into working with many foundations to deepen the awareness of Chinese contemporary art in Miami and beyond. He will share with us his sweet joy in tapping into the myth of collecting art. Last but not least, I'm thinking we need someone who has interacted with artists, curators, museum directors, critics, galleries, and collectors, but still remain his own objective attitude. So then I found Robert Adentro. He has been shooting Chinese contemporary art in 2006 to 2008. His recent celebrated film, The Rising Tide, featuring a number of Chinese artists, have been premiered in many museums along with the spread of Chinese contemporary art exhibitions across this country. He himself is an artist, a filmmaker, currently working on an animated nonfiction work set in China. I'm thrilled to, in addition to the laudatory speakers, we have great cohorts of faculties, students, staff, and community people who will present their engagement with China, its culture, its art, its tradition, and China's metamorphosis. Thanks to Professor Wang Zhang, Robert Adams, Marcus Norns, Celine Wang, Will Thompson, and Lucy Fryer, the owner of Nandy's Knowledge Cafe, for making this symposium more meaningful and relevant to Ann Arbor. Also, I'd like to indulge a little bit with my personal thanks to a couple of important friends here in Ann Arbor. Professor Robert Adams, as I said, he introduced me to U of M in 2016. We have made acquaintance since 2008. I have been working with you on many projects. You bring a lot of students from the US, mostly majoring in architecture, coming over to China, and we share a lot of fun experiences. And I also like to thanks to Natsu Oyobi, Asian art curator. Her brilliant personality enlightens my vision about other arts. At last, I'd like to extend my sincere gratitude to my dear sister, Kara Stepanchuk, who made this whole organization possible under the big support. And I also like to say a little bit thanks to our support team, Ina Shorloff, LRCCS Administrator Jessica Chen, work study student Raquel, the program designer, and David Merchant, communications editor. Without all your devoted commitment, the symposium will never be realized. And also, I'm really thankful for Lisa. Lisa is a great person who has been working with all of us, me and Kara in particular, to getting all this symposium settled here. So the next thing is, let me introduce Natsu Oyobi, who will introduce our first panel speakers.